Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we have had so much fun trying out all of the features like Q&As and polls that let us be really creative and engage with our audience. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome to episode 63 of Podcast Royal, where we're talking all things Platinum Jubilee, Prince Louis stealing our hearts at Trooping the Color, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's return to royal events, and of course, our beautiful Queen. Plus, we've got none other than royal expert Elizabeth Holmes on the show today to break down the Platinum Jubilee with us. So much to dive into, so let's get into it.
It is our Platinum Jubilee episode. Oh my gosh, I am riding on such a royal high from this past weekend. How are you, and what are you into this week? I mean, other than the obvious, the Platinum Jubilee, which we will delve plenty into.
Yeah, I know. We were just talking before we started recording about how it's almost impossible to recap everything in one episode. And we'll get into it a little bit later on, but it was a week of fun events to follow along with. So before I get in, I have I guess kind of a random thing I'm into this week that's totally unrelated to the Jubilee. But before we get into that, I just have to talk about and get ourselves laughing with our listeners. Prince Louis shushing his mother at the Queen's Jubilee pageant. I know everyone's seen the memes of him. He is officially the most popular royal this week, and I think Catherine has now become the most relatable royal to any moms of young children this week.
Mm-hmm. My gosh, put that hand over her mouth, Jessica. And I said, oh, no, 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 Prince Louis, you did not. But she handled it so well. And then he did that little, like, I didn't even know people still did this gesture, like the thumb on nose.
I know, it felt like it was like, didn't kids do that like in like the 1950s?
Yes. So, but I thought, I mean, if I were Kate, I don't know if I would have handled that shushing moment as well as she did, but props to her because she handled it with class and grace.
I think what was so great about it is, one, seeing Louis interact with so many members of the family. I mean, he sat in Prince Charles' lap for a little while. You know, we saw him running around by Her Majesty, sat in his dad's lap. We saw him interact with his siblings and his mom. And I don't really think we've ever seen this much of his personality.
Yeah.
I think that's what I really enjoyed about it. But I don't know if you saw this on the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's Instagram account. They kind of recapped all the events. And at the end in the caption, they put, "We had an incredible time, especially Louis," with the little eyeball emoji.
I did see that. I'm just glad they're in on, I mean, of course they're in on the joke. I asked my mom, I said, because of course, you know, like on Thursday, for example, they're up on the balcony with him. They can't see everything he's, I mean, they can see that he's, you know, he's being Louis and he has so much personality, but they probably couldn't see everything, especially William. He's a couple steps down. But can you just imagine when they went home that night and like we're watching the coverage and they're like, oh my gosh, look at all these meme worthy Louis moments. That's our kid. Like, I just think that's amazing.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so the thing that I'm into this week, or back into, I guess, this is not an ad, but I've been getting back into the Duolingo language learning app. Have you used that before, Rachel?
No, I haven't, but I've thought about it because I speak pretty fluent Spanish, but I would like to start learning French. So tell me more.
Yeah, so, same. This one, I know it's pretty popular. A lot of people use Duolingo, and I started using it a while back and kind of got busy and quit, but I re-downloaded it. If you haven't used the app before, there's tons of languages to choose from, and it really walks you through, understanding the language, sentence structure, how to speak it. So our friends who really love Britain, you can learn Welsh or Irish, or if you want to, expand beyond Britain, you can, pick from all kinds of languages. And I am actually practicing French right now. When I was in school, I took Spanish and had several levels of Spanish, but I never took French. So that's what I'm learning, and back into it this week. And I recommend that for anyone who has a few minutes every day to spend learning a new language. So,
Love
what about
that.
you? What are you into, and how are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm good. We're going to talk about this with Elizabeth in a little bit on our chat with her, but I am off to London in 2.5 weeks, and of course, I've never been more excited to get there after seeing everything. Of course, the Jubilee's over, and but I hope and I'm confident that the spirits will still be high in early July. I'm there July 1st through the 10th, and so I'm very excited about that. But what I'm into this week, other than the obvious Platinum Jubilee overload, which we're dedicating this entire episode to, and I'm still absolutely riding on a major high from, I'm going to use this moment to spotlight, of course, that we finally saw a photo of baby Lily from her first birthday. So the Sussexes had a backyard picnic at Frogmore Cottage to mark the occasion last Saturday. She is so beautiful. That red hair, she and her brother share that red hair. Of course, their father does as well. And we all, speaking of seeing babies for the first time, now we've seen Lily before, but it was in profile and wasn't a full on shot like this was. But we also saw our first glimpse of August Brooksbank's
We did.
face. We usually always shoots him from the back, right? And he is so cute too. He looks like both of his parents. And I also want to mention here, because we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about the Jubilee, that the Brooksbanks have new digs and
Mhm.
will now split their time 50-50 between the UK and Portugal, where Jack got a new job. So it's exciting for the Brooksbanks. And I want to call out another royal exhibit I'm thrilled for, although I will miss it because I won't be in the UK yet. But if you are in the UK right now or will be there before June 15th, you might want to check this out. The Spencer Tiara is on display at Sotheby's in London as part of an exhibition called Power and Image Royal and Aristocratic Tiaras, which started on May 28th and it runs until June 15th. So if you are in London and want to see it, please make haste because you've got 1 week from the day this episode airs to check it out. So that is what I'm into this week. And let's dig into segment one, your fashion pick of the week. I don't know how you're going to choose because we've got so many Jubilee looks and there's so many good fashion picks to choose from. So, what is your fashion pick of the week?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going to dig into some fashion with Elizabeth later on, but this segment is always really fun, but it is quite a tough one this time to narrow it down to one outfit with, all of the amazing royal fashion we saw this week.
Yeah.
So, I thought I'd just share a few little recaps and things that I picked up on and kind of noted this week. First, I really loved how at Trooping the Color, the royal family really coordinated with the blue and white theme. I think really across all of the events, I feel like we saw a lot of blues and a lot of pinks, but Her Majesty in that light blue dress with the white trim and matching hat, that was a great choice in my opinion. And then we saw the Duchess of Cornwall in white and blue, and the Duchess of Cambridge in that rewear of the white coat dress with the white and navy hat. Princess Charlotte in a blue dress, Princess George in a navy suit, and cutie Prince Louis was also in his dad's sailor suit that he wore to Trooping the Color. I think it was in 1985.
Yep.
So that was a really fun moment to see. I also noticed the Wessexes were coordinating in pink, and I'm really not sure why they didn't go with the blue theme. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. I didn't really know why they went with pink, but they looked great. And we even saw Princess Eugenie, who was not on the balcony. She still posted a photo on her Instagram account, and she also had a light blue dress on, and of course we saw a little glimpse of the Duchess of Sussex in blue with that hat with the blue bow
Yeah.
as well. But what did you think about the Wessexes in pink at Trooping the Color?
Yeah, I did. I guess I didn't really think much about it, to be honest with you, but I do know that Sophie again wore pink the next day. So maybe that was just the color that she went with. I mean, um, I don't know. That's actually a great question, and I'd love listeners to weigh in on this. DM us or email us, because every it seemed like there's no way that that was a coincidence, right? Like it seemed very intentional that blue is our color theme, and actually we're going to talk about that with Elizabeth Holmes in a little bit. But I thought Sophie looked beautiful. I thought Louise looked
Mhm.
beautiful, and but yeah, that's a great point that I guess I had not thought of. But blue definitely was the color of the day on Thursday for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved it. And then, so going on to the service of Thanksgiving, I have to say Catherine was stunning in that soft yellow dress and hat.
Yes.
Um, I think she had a lot of fans of that outfit. And I keep wondering how every color and every shade just looks great on her.
I know, right? I'm like, what? Yellow does not look yellow, orange, like those lighter colors do not look good on me, but everything looks good on Kate.
I also, of course, really liked Megan's dress. I loved her shoes. I thought Zara's outfit was really fun. She had that hot pink coat dress, which I kind of thought she took a note from her grandmother to dress in bright colors.
Hmm.
But I also wanted to mention a lesser known royal that really stood out to me. So we don't really hear much about Lady Frederick Windsor. So, for listeners who may not know her, she is actually married to the son of Prince Michael of Kent, who is a cousin of Her Majesty the Queen. So she is a distant relative by marriage to the royal family, and her, I guess her non-royal name is Sophie Winkleman. Anyway, you may have seen her in photos at the service of Thanksgiving. She looked really, really pretty in this bright, rosy, kind of fuchsia colored dress, and she had this headband with a big pink flower on it. But I noticed something that I have not seen anyone else talk about. Maybe somebody's mentioned it, but I haven't seen it anywhere. I'm pretty sure she was wearing the exact same dress as Princess
She
Beatrice,
was.
but
She
B was
was.
in blue. Okay.
She was. I saw this. I think I saw this on People. If they weren't the same dress, they were almost identical.
I mean, they
And
had to have been the same dress.
yeah, yeah, I think they were, and I'm 99.9% sure that I read that on People that they were the same because I've been reading a lot about they're calling her Sophie Windsor. So, Sophie Windsor this week and how she's an emerging fashion royal icon, and they put those two looks, Beatrice and Sophie, up against each other, and I think they're the same.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm glad you noticed that too. The Wessexes also, they kept with their pink theme. They had kind of a mix of pink and blush hues both days. And Sophie Wessex's dress at the service of Thanksgiving, I really loved. It was this light pink, kind of sparkly dress, and she had this big, beautiful sash tied in a bow in the back, like right behind her shoulders.
Hmm.
I just thought it looked really feminine and pretty. And I just don't think I can pick a favorite this week. I think they were all outstanding. And I'm going to stop talking fashion now because I know we're going to dig into it with Elizabeth later on.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just impossible to pick one look because again, we'll talk about this later. We keep queuing up this interview, but I don't think there was a miss this weekend. And I never say that, right? Like there's always with so many people over the course of so many days, there's always bound to be a miss somewhere. And I don't know where that miss would be. I just thought everybody looked great. And did you happen to see Mike Tyndall putting on Zara's hat and comparing, I think it was Eugenie and Zara's outfits on Friday. The Eugenie was in orange and Zara was in pink to Starburst. He is always one with the joke. I appreciate that so much. Also, I have to say this is really has nothing to do with anything, but I really liked seeing the Tyndall kids this weekend. I liked seeing the Phillips kids this weekend, and just people that we don't often see. A lot of the non-working royals that are not always out front, but it was great to see everybody this weekend.
Definitely.
All right, well, let's move into segment two, the royal rundown. Before we get into our chat with Elizabeth, let's cover a few pre-jubilee items in the royal rundown. This will be very brief, but I just want to take a few moments to say. Let me put my cheesy hat on for a moment because you knew this was coming. Especially after this weekend, how fortunate I feel to be a royal reporter. I really am writing still. Today, we're recording this on Tuesday night, as we always do. Of course, the Jubilee ended on Sunday, so 2 days ago. I'm riding on such a high for the monarchy right now, and I'm so moved and impressed by the Platinum Jubilee. I really immersed myself fully in it. I First of all, because I love Her Majesty, but also because I was covering it for Marie Claire. So I'm so glad that I jumped in head first. It was a wonderful weekend. I think I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I was having trouble getting excited about it for some reason. It just didn't seem real that it was already almost here. And then thankfully that changed as soon as I saw Trooping the Color start and the Cambridge kids were in the carriage. And it just, I mean, it was just great. And I can't wait to continue the celebration tomorrow night with you because you were ended up traveling last week. So we didn't get to see each other over the Jubilee, but we are making up for that tomorrow.
Yes, definitely.
All right, a couple of pre-Jubilee bits. So first up, after we recorded our last episode 2 weeks ago, PJ the Corgi came. He made his debut or her debut. I'm not really sure. That was an adorable idea. I think it's I don't know, PJ. We'll call it a boy dog. He was kind of the mascot of the Jubilee, and knowing you and your love for dogs, I'm positive that you loved him.
I did love PJ, and we actually shared him on our Instagram account. So I'm sure listeners saw that. And there was just so many like cute little things throughout, the week associated with the Platinum Jubilee that I really liked. I know we'll talk more later about that, but yeah, loved PJ.
Yes, and we didn't touch on this in the last episode because it hadn't happened yet, but Megan visited Uvalde, Texas after the horrific school shooting there. That happened on May 24th, which was the day we recorded. I know we mentioned it really briefly with our guest last episode, Kenzie Schofield, in our interview with her, but later that week, Megan headed off to Uvalde to pay her respects, which I found very moving and touching. And from all accounts that I've read, she really tried to keep it under the radar, of course. Megan can't do anything right, so folks want to say that she's doing it for publicity. But I was wondering what you thought of her visit.
Yeah, I think I saw one or two mentions of it online, but I didn't see a lot of coverage, which I think is how it should be. I feel like in these situations, the focus should be on the victims and their families. And I do think it's really kind when celebrities offer support during difficult times, whether it's by volunteering or providing resources to those in need. I agree it shouldn't be for publicity. I did read that she dropped off some sandwiches and beverages, and I think that's a really thoughtful gesture to take time to do that.
Yeah, and I thought that it was extremely classy of her, and our hearts just continue to be with the families of the victims. I'm gut sick. I know you are too, and like I said last episode, it really does put all of this into perspective.
Yes. As does this. We also saw that the Queen visited Balmoral for some R&R prior to the Jubilee. But on her way back into London, the plane actually ran into a lightning storm. And the storm actually forced the pilot to divert his first attempt at landing and ride out the storm in the air for about 15 minutes. Thankfully, on his second attempt to land, he was successful and everyone's okay. But a scary moment there for sure.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And also, pre Jubilee, Her Majesty released a portrait to commemorate the occasion. She wore a blue Angela Kelly creation that actually appeared again at Trooping the Color on Thursday. So, this portrait was much, much more low key than her other Jubilee portraits. She didn't have any crowns, she didn't have any medals, she didn't have any sashes as she had in the past. So, I was wondering what you thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this a million times before. I always love an opportunity to see a tiara or a sash. I mean, that really gives me the royal vibes. But I loved this outfit choice for her. And I thought to not have the medals or the tiara, the outfit in itself, it did feel very appropriate for the occasion. It was just a really like nice high quality royal outfit that, I thought the color was great. And so, I mean, I loved it. Again, like I always love seeing a tiara or a sash or medals, but I did really like this choice of an outfit.
You know what this really spoke to me as? I think the other Jubilee portraits say, I am the queen, but this portrait says, I am Elizabeth.
Mm.
And it was much more subdued. She looks like a grandmother. She looks like my grandmother, actually, with, her hair. And it just, she just, she, it really, and I heard this said so many times that she did not want to make the Platinum Jubilee about her. She wanted to make it about the monarchy.
Yeah.
And I think that the portrait and everything that happened at the Jubilee, obviously we were celebrating her, but it was also so much bigger than her too. And it was about the institution of the monarchy and the history that's been made here. So I loved it as well. She looks beautiful, of
Yeah, that's a
course.
really great point, and I hadn't thought of that. But you're right. It sort of takes the focus off of, here is a portrait of, the ruler of the country to here is a portrait of the woman behind the monarchy.
Yeah.
And I think that's really great perspective. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, a last little bit of news before we get into the main event with Elizabeth Holmes. We're going to break down the Jubilee day by day. Minnie asked, who was that man in uniform alongside Her Majesty's first balcony appearance at Trooping the Color on Thursday? The answer is her beloved cousin, the Duke of Kent, who, in a bit of news that we already had on the docket, and then there he was, he showed up. It's like we manifested him. He
Mhm.
has a book coming out in August, his autobiography, A Royal Life will be released August 16th. Looking forward to reading that, of course. And with that, let's dig deep into the Platinum Jubilee with Elizabeth Holmes. Take a listen. If you are a royal lover like us, you definitely know the name Elizabeth Holmes. She's a royal expert, veteran fashion writer, creator of the beloved bulletin newsletter So Many Thoughts, and author of a book we love, HRH, So Many Thoughts on Royal Style, which was an instant New York Times bestseller. We're so excited to have you here today, Elizabeth, to delve deep into the Platinum Jubilee. What else could we talk about today, right? So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So before we dig into the 4 days one by one, I'd like to go around the horn here and ask all of us our most standout moment from the Jubilee. I'm really excited to talk about this. Elizabeth, let's start with you. What was your number one standout moment from this past weekend?
Oh my gosh. So I was in London. I
Mm.
traveled for it and I made a very last minute trip, but I was just sort of like overcome by like this moment in history. And I was like, I just need to be there. And so I would say my number one moment was when the Queen walked out onto the balcony for Trooping the Color on Thursday morning. I was in the crowd and I had made the mad dash up the mall to get a spot where I could see the balcony because it was sort of obstructed by all the concert setup. Um, but seeing her there and seeing her walk out, I mean, it was so moving. I mean, it truly was. There's been so much swirling about the Queen's health and, there's so many questions about, what she was going to be able to do. And I just kept thinking I wanted her to make it to her parties in June. And then, here she was stepping out, celebrating this historic milestone. It was amazing.
What a powerful moment to be able to see her in person for this event. And we want to hear all about how London was. We will for sure dig into that. But Jessica, I'm dying to know what your standout moment from the weekend was.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick just one. Elizabeth, I was actually following along on your Instagram stories because I could not be there in person. I was traveling for work this week and had to miss it, but I really enjoyed seeing it through your Instagram. And I mean, I agree. Any point where we were able to see Her Majesty was just really exciting and incredible, and it was really amazing to see her there. And then, of course, I know we're going to dig into this later, probably too, but all of the little Louis moments were
Oh my
really
gosh.
stand out for me too.
Louis is just the most adorable child. He's going to be a handful. I'm telling you.
He
Um,
is a handful.
yeah. Look,
The
let me
present
tell you
tense.
about the moment he put his hand over his mama's mouth. Jessica and I are from the South, Elizabeth, and I said, "Oh no, Louie, you do not do that." But Kate
Oh.
handled it with full grace and class as ever. But for me, that, I mean, this is the impossible question because there were so many moments and I was covering it. I covered the whole thing for Marie Claire. So I was, I dug deep into everything. But I would say for me, the queen, it was up in the air. So she, of course, made the 2 balcony appearances on Thursday for Trooping the Color. And then she wasn't seen for 2 days. And so it was up in the air whether she would feel well enough to come on Sunday after the pageant to get on the balcony again. And then I remember the pageant was ending. Elizabeth, you were probably there. The pageant was ending and the royal standard is raised, right?
Mm.
I'm getting goosebumps even now as I'm recounting it. And the royal standard was raised, and I said, oh, and I was actually with my mom, who's a huge royal fan as well. And I said, "Oh, mom, she's there, she's there." And then, of course, it's always a game time decision. Will she be able to come out? And she did, in that beautiful bright green. And it just, after 4 days of being immersed in the Platinum Jubilee, to see her in that moment, it just wrapped everything up in a bow and was incredibly powerful for me.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Loved it. Well, let's go back to Thursday. We're going to break this down day by day. So Thursday, for listeners, just in case you maybe didn't see this, I don't know how you're a royal fan and didn't dive into this, but that, to each his own. So Thursday kicked off the Jubilee with Trooping the Color, which is an annual birthday celebration for the monarch that included a military parade and a really impressive 70 aircraft fly past. I love a good fly past, right? Like, just like goosebumps. Were you there on the ground for the fly past? Was that
It
incredible?
was, and I have to say it's incredibly cool. Like it looks cool
So
on video, obviously, but like to be the like whoosh of the moment is really, it's really something.
was it as loud as Louis made it seem it was? With
I
his little
think what
hands over
I,
his.
oh my gosh, I think what happened was because it was the Jubilee, there was like multiple fly pass. I mean, it was like time, there was like I lost count. The one that gets the most attention is the one where it's red, white, and blue. And the one
Yeah.
before that, they were flying in the formation of 70, which was very cool.
Mhm.
But there were like at least 4 or 5 other aircraft situations. This is not my specialty, you guys, so I don't know what the
Aircraft
aircrafts were.
situation.
But I think it was the like repeated loud noise that perhaps made Louis get to the point that he did
Yeah.
covering his
Well,
ears.
and he has little ears too, right? He's 4.
Yes,
So
he's 4.
anyway, so Trooping the Color was all about the Queen. Again, it's hard to deny that the Cambridge kids, especially little Prince Louis, stole the show. So the 3 Cambridge kids all made their carriage procession debut on Thursday. And then, of course, on the balcony, Louis was never expressionless, giving us everything from sheer delight to total horror. Those planes probably were really loud. So let's talk fashion for a moment, because Elizabeth, I know that is one of your many specialties. It seemed on Thursday that the color theme was blue. So we had the Queen in a blue Angela Kelly look that she also wore in her official Jubilee portrait. Kate wore a white Alexander McQueen rewear, but a white and blue hat, sapphire earrings that once belonged to Princess Diana. Louis was in a sailor suit that his dad, Prince William, wore in 1985. Charlotte was in a blue dress, George in a navy suit, Camilla was in blue, Meghan was in blue, though we didn't see much of her. It was a rewear from the night before her wedding in 2018. So, Elizabeth, I want to ask you, is there any significance to the blue color palette here?
Well, my theory here is that the Queen always sets the tone, and I think it was probably made clear to the rest of the family what she would be wearing first. And then, I mean, if you look at the balcony image with Kate and the kids in white and blue, and the Queen in white and blue, it looks so harmonious, right? It's such
Yeah.
a powerful thing. And at a time when there were so many questions swirling around about the family dynamic, that I think that sort of unspoken sense that you get when you're looking at, a picture of people who are all sort of coordinating, there is just sort of a calming, peace that comes with that. And I think that's something that they were trying to project throughout the Jubilee, that, this was a family that was very much together in celebrating and keeping the focus on the Queen. And that's why, I mean, I loved that there were so many rewears, that Kate was in a rewear, Camilla was rewearing an outfit from Ascot. I mean, that a rewear to me is always a signal that they're trying to downplay the fashion that they're wearing, because there's something more important going on. And certainly the Queen was the focal point of the weekend.
I love that. Okay, a couple more Trooping the Color facts before we go on for those that on the off chance missed it. So Charles took the salute for the Queen on horseback alongside William and Anne. The Queen, as we mentioned a moment ago, made two balcony appearances on Thursday. The first was with her cousin, the Duke of Kent, and then later with the working royals. It was announced on Thursday morning that Andrew had tested positive for COVID, which is very convenient. I will leave that, will leave my comments there, and would miss all of the Jubilee festivities, which no one cried over. And Harry and Meghan watched the festivities alongside other non-working royals from the Major General's office. And Charlotte, and maybe one of my favorite moments from the day, tried and failed to calm Louis's exuberant waving in the carriage. She actually had a few moments this weekend where she was totally pulling like Charlotte. I call it the Charlotte in charge moments. Like George at one point, I think it was on Sunday, George leaned onto the balcony and Charlotte like tapped him, and then he quickly corrected and stood back up straight again. And then Louis, did you see this on Sunday? Louis put his legs on Charlotte. She pushed him off.
Yes.
Like Charlotte is who I aspire to be. So she was adorable.
I have to say that the carriage ride in particular was so interesting to me because, again, it's something you see on TV, but when you witness it in person, you get a sense of how quickly those carriages move.
Yeah.
And the crowds were huge. I mean, huge. And we had gotten there at like 4 a.m, and people just, I mean, it just built from there. And so by the time the carriages actually drive past, it would be so overwhelming. And so all the expressions of the kids' faces are all like, they're sort of confused and a little like, you can just tell they're just sort of reserved about what's happening. And I think, like, of course they had to have been, I mean, it was sort of a blur of, they're trying to figure out like who to wave to and what they're supposed to do. And
Sure.
like, I just found it highly relatable because
Can
it's
you imagine
clearly,
how
you can't
overwhelming?
rehearse what it feels like to be in a
Yeah.
carriage in a crowd.
Yeah, with thousands of people screaming your name,
No,
cheering, waving
exactly.
flags, and you're going quickly and you're also going backwards. Like the kids were going backwards. So that's like just so many different things going on at once. Did you get to see them come by in the carriage?
I did. It was incredible.
Wow.
I mean, it was one of those things that like, yeah, it's just a moment I'll never forget. And, they were all very much trying to figure out what they should be doing. And at one point, so they go, and then they do, they have the proceedings at Horse Guards, and then they come back. And so on the way back, I think they had some of their energy had kind of run out, which I don't blame them. It's a long day for those little kids. And when Kate passed us, she reached toward George and sort of like tapped his knee to try and get him to start waving again.
Oh,
And he gave
wow.
her this look like, and then he smiled and waved again. But it was really funny. It was the most subtle little prompt of like, keep going. It was a
Oh,
very
wow.
mom
That's
moment.
good inside baseball right there.
Well, Elizabeth, you mentioned the crowds being really big, and I think that was another standout moment for me too. Is just the incredible, the crowds and the cheering and the excitement. And I wonder, really what was going through the kids' minds as they went through on the carriages. But I was going to ask you, do you think that us seeing so much of the Cambridge kids over the course of the events was intentional to show that, while we have a queen who's been on the throne for 70 years, the royal family has a really bright future ahead?
Yeah, I do. And I think that the Cambridges have, Will and Kate have seemed to have very much kept their children out of the public eye, and certainly to the same extent as, Will and Harry were when they were kids. We saw them a lot more. And the Cambridges have opted for a much more private lifestyle, but there's only so long they can do that, right? I mean, they are a public family. And so this was like a really perfect time, I think, to start, like showing them their roles as royals. This is their life, this is the family they were born into. And I thought they did it in like very sweet and gentle ways, when I don't want to get ahead of it, but when they went off to Wales, and they were doing a walkabout with the crowd, you could see how Kate and Will were sort of coaching George and Charlotte and keeping them comfortable and helping them learn to interact with the crowds. And, I think it is such an important thing to show that, the Queen at this historic moment has, several generations backing her up here, and there's a lot more to come for the monarchy.
Absolutely. So later Thursday evening, the Queen lit beacons at Windsor Castle. She reportedly also met her namesake, baby Lilibet Diana, that night. And Friday was the Queen's service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral. There was a reception after, and though Her Majesty didn't make it because of discomfort experienced at Trooping the Color, Harry and Meghan were there, hand in hand, smiling, waving. Meghan looked fantastic, I thought, in head to toe Dior. This ended up, unfortunately, though, being the only time we saw Harry and Meghan out front all weekend. So I'm wondering if you were surprised by that, and what was your impression of their time in the UK based off of your sources? Because I believe they flew home on Sunday, so they've been home now for a couple days. So were you surprised that we didn't see them very much?
I mean, yes and no. So all the pre-Jubilee press and all their critics, were trying to say that they were going to overshadow the Queen and steal the spotlight. It was all these
Mhm.
unfounded reports. And so I think that their decision to lay very low was a smart one, because they were clearly there and part of the celebrations, but nobody could accuse them of, being flashy or overstepping or anything
No.
like that. And so I love actually that the first glimpse we got of them was, those sort of grainy long lens photographs at Trooping on Thursday, because it was just a reminder that they are there and within the family fold and taking part in the celebrations, but certainly we're not front and center. And then, it did feel like a big deal that the Queen was not able to attend on Friday, but it was quite heartening to see the way that her family showed up, and to celebrate her. And I think, um, watching Harry and Meghan go up the steps of the cathedral, there was, that was a really big moment. I mean, there's been so much pressure, I think, because of the pandemic, and, people haven't just been out and about. And so this was the first time we'd seen them in the royal fold in like more than 2 years. That was a big
Yeah.
deal. And I thought they executed flawlessly. I mean, Meghan looked incredible, and that outfit was super stylish, super true to her. Who doesn't love a belted trench? That's such a signature style for her. But then it was, because it was in that very pale gray, it was really low key, especially compared to like Harry's cousins, Eugenie in bright orange and Zara Tindall in pink. She sort of blended in with the stone of the cathedral in a really lovely way, in a really sort of like, I'm here to honor the Queen, not to
Yeah.
stand out and like I loved it. I really did. I think they were in a really difficult position, and anything they did was going to be so heavily scrutinized that, do one big public moment and lay low the rest of the time was pretty smart, as much as I would have loved to see them more.
I really hoped that I would see them on Sunday at the pageant, but it is what it is, and I agree. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't, right? And so I think that they chose the best course of action, and I'm just glad we got to see them at all, honestly.
Honestly, I was so glad that they were just participating in it. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like that this was such a moment in history, and like it's Harry's grandmother, like of course they should be there to celebrate her. And
Yeah.
the fact that now we all know, everybody can take a deep breath, that Lilibet has met her namesake, and like that was, there was so much, chatter about that. It's like everybody's on good standing. And the fact that we got a picture of Lilibet after the fact was just a
Yes.
cherry on top.
What a cutie.
Well, you mentioned that Eugenie was in orange. We also saw Sophie and Zara in pink, and of course, Kate wore Amelia Wickstead. And you were on site here and at every other Jubilee event. So, can you give us a behind the scenes look at everything?
Yeah, so the cathedral was like such a different setup than Trooping. Trooping, everybody went very early and some people camped out overnight. It was crazy. But in the cathedral, there just wasn't the space, but there was certainly the crowds. And so it was just a much different vibe. And they kind of keep the crowds back a little bit. And there was a lot of cars coming and members of the military line. It was just very hard to see. So people, I think, were getting a little anxious about that. And there's just I don't know, it just felt like a little bit more of a charged atmosphere. But certainly it's a beautiful setting, the steps of the cathedral, to watch them sort of waltz up and waltz down. And it was very cool to see how they arrived, and they arrived in sort of reverse order. So the royals that are further down the line show up first, and then, last to go in is Charles. And then on the way out, they reverse that. The one thing that I did find really notable is that at the end of the service, usually at the end of a service of Thanksgiving like this, the family will sort of linger at the top of the steps of the cathedral to allow for sort of a casual group shot. We've seen that certainly in 2012 with the Diamond Jubilee, and they
Mhm.
didn't do that this time. They went out sort of couple by couple, and I think that was really intentional, because they didn't. I mean, even if the picture had been the happiest smiles, even if they were all getting along super well, it would have made the story of the day about the family dynamic and not about the service, thanking the Queen. And so they just avoided that entirely. And I think, as much as I would have liked to see the group shot, that it was very smart of them to avoid that.
That's really interesting. I had not thought about that.
Because I mean, I'm sure if you like sort of imagine services of Thanksgiving in the past, they do just sort of like linger this very casually, just like, and it just allows the cameras to get, a couple of casual shots of them all interacting. And this time, the service was over and out came Charles and Camilla and they got in their car, and then out came Will and Kate and they got in their car, and then out, it was just, and then, Sophie and Anne and Edward, and, they came out as they went in. And so they avoided that group moment entirely.
That's so fascinating. I had not thought about that. So let's flash to Saturday. So Saturday overview was a huge day, huge weekend, really, for George and Charlotte and Louis. But George and Charlotte were there on Saturday. Louis was not. George and Charlotte joined their parents for a surprise visit to Wales. Anne represented the Queen at the Derby at Epsom Downs, and the Royals wished baby Lily, a happy first birthday on Instagram. My one wish, my wishes were fulfilled beyond, like, my Royals cup is more than full right now. But if I had to put an exclamation point on this weekend, I would have loved a Lily meets Lilibet photo, but we haven't gotten that. But we did get the photo of Lily, so that is, beyond. She's the cutest. So then that evening, the platinum party at the palace, which, say that 5 times fast. I finally said it so many times now that I got it out without messing it up. Platinum party at the palace. George and Charlotte joined their parents again for performances from the likes of Queen and Adam Lambert, Rod Stewart, Alicia Keys, Diana Ross. And my mom pointed this out, even Diana's favorite band, Duran Duran, which I thought, wow, how cool would that be if that were intentional? But I don't think many things are by mistake. I think that's really cool, actually. So the Queen was, again, not physically there, but she surprised everyone with this Paddington Bear skit to open the show. And yes, I cried. I mean, how could you not when Paddington Bear says, thank you? Like, I could cry about this now. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. And William spoke at the event, as did a really emotional Charles. And we also found out that, surprise, Pippa Middleton is pregnant with her third child. So congratulations to Pippa Middleton Matthews.
Yes, I will say that the pageant, sorry, the platinum party at the palace, tripping over my words in my
Biggest tongue twister.
Yes, was really incredible in a way that was like one thing that I had underestimated, that what it would feel like to be in the crowd, because so they gave out tickets on a lottery system and there was no way you could get one. Like, I was like, maybe I'll just buy one secondhand, and they didn't even allow any of that. And so they just, again, they sort of like, the stage was in front of Buckingham Palace, and then they opened up the park all around there in the mall with big screens that you could come and watch. And it was like this huge party. I mean, it was like London had been like cooped up from the pandemic and everybody was ready to have like a very good time. And I went with some friends, and it was kind of a sight to behold, because you know the 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 Jubilee festivities, tend to be pretty composed and, pageant like and things like this. And this was just a party. I mean, it was a full on party. It was crazy.
Was there a standout moment during that evening that was your favorite part?
I mean, I loved the Paddington Bear sketch. I mean, I thought that was just absolutely adorable. And it was such a shift. So again, going back to 2012, a decade ago, the last time we saw the Queen do something like this, she appeared with James Bond for the opening of the London Olympics. And everybody was like, like so floored by that she would do something like that. And that was so daring. But this was so sweet. I mean, it was just everybody just sort of quieted down and was listening. And like, it was just to be in the crowd for that moment. And when she pulled that marmalade sandwich out of her black handbag, I lost it. I was like, oh my God, I can't sort of overstate the affection that Brits have for the Queen. There's all these questions about the monarchy and the future of the monarchy that are very warranted. And I think they will continue. But the Queen and celebrating the Queen felt kind of separate from all of that this weekend, that people were just so thrilled to be there to celebrate with her.
As they should be. I mean, I don't know, who knew that it would be Paddington Bear that would sum up all my feelings in one sentence, but just the sincerity that he said, thank you, ma'am, for everything. I mean, I just lost it. There were so many times this weekend that I cried, and it's just, we're living through history, and it's just such a gift. And so let's do the Sunday recap before Jess has a question about the that final balcony moment. So Sunday concluded the 4 days with the big Jubilee lunch and then the Platinum Jubilee pageant, which actually I ended up loving. I did not know how that was going to go, right? But
It
I
was really
loved it.
something, wasn't it? Yeah.
So cool. I watched every moment of it. I thought it was so neat. It showcased UK culture over the past 7 decades of the Queen's reign, showing us just really how long she's been on the throne. It has been, I mean, 70 years. And Louis once again stole the show alongside his siblings and his parents. And then, okay, so then like boom to boom to boom emotional moments. Ed Sheeran sings Perfect to close the show, which he dedicated to the Queen and Prince Philip as these images of them are playing. Then, like I said at the top of the show, towards the end of the pageant, commentators noticed that the royal standard is raised, which meant that Her Majesty was at Buckingham Palace. Then I'll hand it off to you, Jessica.
Yeah, and then finally, the Queen's third and final balcony appearance of the weekend in bright green alongside Charles and Camilla and all five Cambridges as the crowd sang God Save the Queen to her. What were your thoughts on this moment to really close out the Jubilee, Elizabeth?
Well, I was first of all so glad to see her do that. It was like this beautiful balcony bookend, right? She opened it and she closed it on the
Mhm.
balcony of Buckingham Palace. But it was so striking to me how different the balcony moments were, right? Because if you look at trooping, all the men were in their uniforms, the women were in their hats. It was very formal and traditional, and they were bathed in sunlight. It was this beautiful moment. And then on Sunday evening, because it was a much smaller group on the balcony, it was just the Queen, her heirs, and their families. And because it had been sort of cloudy and the certainly the bunting had been removed, it was just sort of the family on the balcony, and it presented such a sort of forward looking view. I think it was Charles and William and George were all in their dark suits, and the Queen was there in bright green, and it just looked like this picture of a sort of modern, slimmed down, relatable monarchy. I was really
Yeah.
struck by it. It was really touching.
Well, I wonder if this is a coincidence that on Thursday, Louis was positioned next to Her Majesty. They probably knew he was going to bring the entertainment. He did. He did not disappoint. But then uh, George was next to her on Sunday. And
Yes,
so,
and yeah, and the
yeah,
reports had said that she was just going to go out with her heirs.
I heard
That
that too.
that somebody had said, I think it was Russell Myers in the Mirror had said that she was going to appear with just Charles, William, and George. And so
Mhm.
the fact that Camilla and Kate and Charlotte and Louis were up there too was a surprise to me, but I think very much their arrangement was intentional because it
Yeah.
put her heirs surrounding her.
Yeah, you've got that shot right there of the four of them. And I had heard that too, Elizabeth, that it was just going to be the four of them. But I'm glad because I don't know. I'm an only child, so I don't have siblings. But Elizabeth, if I'm not mistaken, you have three children. And I know obviously Charlotte and Louis know that George is the heir, but you don't like, especially at that age, you don't want to single one out and then what about the other two? I liked how they let them be a unit there. I actually really appreciated that. So,
Well, and it is
uh,
the family that's working on, the Queen's behalf right now, and certainly Camilla too. I mean, we haven't really talked about
mhm,
her, but I think to have those, the image of that group up there, they're certainly their whole lives are, on in service to the monarch, and I think that that was really a wonderful thing. And there were a couple of very sweet smiles exchanged. There was one between the Queen and Kate that seemed
yeah,
like very much an acknowledgement of what Kate has done. And then there was certainly that my favorite moment of all was when George smiled at the Queen.
yes,
And George is always so skeptical in his public appearances, and I totally get that. I mean, it would be so overwhelming, but he's often got sort of a look of he's reserved or he's not quite sure or he's not quite into it. And so to see that very genuine smile flashed at his great grandmother was just, oh my goodness, that image will live on in history books. It's
yeah,
incredible.
that's amazing shot. So, okay, this is a total non sequitur, but I think you both will agree with me on this. I want to talk about Kate's top from her baking photo with the kids. You know
Yeah,
what I'm talking about. I'm sorry.
I
That is
do.
a total 180, but I can't let you as a fashion journalist leave here without commenting on that look because I mean, of course we've seen her all weekend. She's in full dress, she's in hats, but this is just such an at-home moment. I was wondering what you thought of that look.
Well, if you look at Kate's fashion for the Jubilee, I mean, it is so on point because she checked all the boxes. And I think she needed that casual moment, right? Because that's a big part of the Cambridge brand to be, sort of casual and country and relatable. And obviously to be at home baking, to take to the street parties was just adorable. And the fact that they were all in, I mean, her top, I believe, was pink and white, but the whole thing gave off this, the colors of the Union Jack flag with the kids in navy, too, navy and white. And it was just, I thought that was just darling. I mean, they have upped their social media game so far. I mean, it's so good. Every post from the Jubilee was so good, but that in particular, people were just, I mean, squealing. I could hear it through my phone. I mean, it was really adorable. And she looked great. And she, again, that's a big part of that's really important. Royals aren't just like famous, glamorous people. They walk this line between being aspirational and accessible. And, baking cupcakes with your kids in your kitchen is pretty relatable.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
it did feel very on brand for them, and that was fun to see. Um, Sticking on fashion looks, since we do have the expert here, Elizabeth, I was wondering what your favorite, or maybe a couple of your favorite looks of the weekend were. What stood out to you the most?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. I would say I loved the Queen's first coat. I love that she, wore the same outfit from her official Jubilee portrait out on the balcony. Obviously the Jubilee portrait was taken, I think, a couple weeks ago, but to wear it, back to back like that, we got the portrait on Wednesday night, and then she stepped out on Thursday morning in the same outfit. It sort of cements that look as the Jubilee look for her, and that look, I'm sure, will hang in museums, from here to eternity. I mean, that is a really important visual brand. For Meghan, I wish we would have seen her trooping the color outfit a little bit more. I heard that her fantastic hat sold out in mere hours. That was a great look. For Kate, I mean, it's so hard to choose. I loved her two new looks. I love that she wore Amelia Wickstead, and I thought that was just a beautiful sort of sunny yellow color that she wore to the service of Thanksgiving. But then the Stella McCartney that she wore Sunday night for the pageant and then out onto the balcony is kind of fashion forward for her, and it made her look very modern, and she was still able to like look great after managing her kids for hours on end. So I don't know how she does it. There was a lot of good fashion, I have to say. Everybody was very much in the realm of like exactly what you would want and expect from the royal family. So the other piece of context here, especially for fashion, is that there's a cost of living crisis going on in the UK right now, and everybody is talking about that. And so the spending on the Jubilee was a big source of press coverage, especially when I was there. I was really interested in that, and so I think the royals did a great job of looking extremely lovely, but not looking over the top in any way, not looking, like not going too far. It was just very much like the best of British fashion.
I really can't think of any misses. I really can't. And
Mm-mm.
that's not normal for me.
No, even the others, like, Eugenie and Beatrice looked fantastic. They looked
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
good.
Beatrice is having a moment right now. I mean,
Yes.
she is in her prime right now. We've talked about that on the show before. She is just shining, and I love it. And everybody looked great. The colors were great. Everything. I just truly can't think of a miss. And that is, again, not normal. There's usually some look that we say, okay, what about that? But not this time. It was great. And
It was very well done. And like it was all it was like it was just, it ran the gamut of it, and it just, there was so much ahead of the proceedings. Everyone was so nervous about how it was all going to go down, and like from the other side of it, it's like, wow, you guys did it.
yeah,
It went as
yeah.
well as it possibly could.
Yeah, I'm so Jessica and I've been doing this for a long time. You've been doing this for longer, Elizabeth. And there's moments where we're like, what more can we say about these wonderful people? But this weekend just filled my cup up so much, re-energized me. And I'm just, it was wonderful. So, our last question for you, it's difficult to put the impact of the Platinum Jubilee into words. It's a historic moment. We'll never see it again, likely, and definitely not in the three of our lifetimes. It's living history and proof that the Queen has kept her word, and that whether her life be long or short, she would dedicate it to the service of her country and the Commonwealth. So, as we close, Elizabeth, what did the Platinum Jubilee mean to you, and what will it mean to the monarchy going forward?
I think it was just really a time to reflect on Queen Elizabeth and all that she has done. I mean, it's staggering to me truly that she would, take to the throne at the age of 25, and all that she has done and accomplished since then, and how she has, led the monarchy to where it is today. There's just nobody like her in history. And so that was why I like booked a very last minute plane ticket to London to be there for it, because I was like, I just need to witness this. I need to see her, and I need to see the celebrations of her, because I think it's just so profound. And like you said, we're never going to see this again in our lifetimes, and certainly not for a long time. And we're not even likely going to see a queen. I mean,
Right.
we got a bunch of kings coming up here. So,
That's such a good point. We might never see a queen again in our
mhm,
lifetime.
yeah. And so I just, I think of all the very valid and warranted questions about the monarchy and its future. Um, this was a moment to sort of celebrate the queen, and it was a privilege to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I leave for London in 2.5 weeks, and I can't, I'm
Oh my
chomping at the bit.
gosh.
So
What are
I
you what are
hope
you
that
doing over there?
I'm just being a tourist. I'm just going,
Yes.
doing all the things. And Jessica's already been there, and this is actually my first time to the UK. So I
Oh,
know. So I'm more excited and energized than ever. And I'm sure the spirits will still be riding high in 2.5 weeks. And I'm so happy that you got to be there and see it. What a moment of living history. And thanks for sharing your experience with us.
Yes,
of course. Well, and for you and anybody else that's going to London, I did write a bulletin newsletter. Well, actually, two of them. I enlisted a friend who lives in London. If you want any royal inspired travel guides of London,
Yes,
look for
I
it
will
there,
for
because
sure read
there's
that.
so many fun things, yes, to do, and just you can feel a little taste of the royal life.
I'm so excited. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
I enjoyed our time with her so much. She was lovely.
I did too. It was so wonderful to speak with her. I have followed along on her Instagram account for a while and love getting her perspective on all things royal. So that was really, really fun. And I know our listeners enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. And to be there. I mean, I'll be there so soon, and you've been there before, but to be there in that moment, I think Elizabeth really gave us a good behind the scenes perspective of what it was like on the ground. And um, man, I just keep saying we're living history. We're living history. And I want to close with a couple things. First of all, I wrote something on, I believe it was Thursday, and just really how the Jubilee was so special and it was historic. And it's so impressive that she's reigned for this long. We'll, again, probably never see this again in our lifetimes. But to me, it just all comes back to that speech in South Africa she made in 1947 when she was on her 21st birthday, where she said, "For my whole life, may it be long or short, I will be dedicated to service." And I think that this weekend was just a celebration of, at its bare bones, a woman who kept her word. And that's so rare anymore for people to keep promises and vows. But she made a promise and she has kept it. And this weekend was about a kept promise to me. And I'm going to start crying. So I'm going to stop myself from doing that on air. But thank you, Your Majesty, for keeping true to your word. It was a really magical weekend. And as we close, I wanted to read a bit from a statement from the Queen. This was released Sunday evening after all the Jubilee festivities ended. She said, quote, "When it comes to how to mark 70 years as your queen, there is no guidebook to follow. It really is a first. But I've been humbled and deeply touched that so many people have taken to the streets to celebrate my platinum jubilee. While I may not have attended every event in person, my heart has been with you all, and I remain committed to serving you to the best of my ability, supported by my family. I have been inspired by the kindness, joy, and kinship that has been so evident in recent days, and I hope this renewed sense of togetherness will be felt for many years to come. I thank you most sincerely for your good wishes and for the part you have all played in these happy celebrations." So, any final thoughts on the Jubilee?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many memorable moments from the past week, and it was just incredible to see the whole family there together. It was incredible to see Her Majesty, just commemorate this moment with so much excitement, really, in her country and across the world. And I really enjoyed that. And even the lighthearted sort of funny moments, like we talked about the Paddington Bear skit, some of the jokes Prince Charles made. And, even those moments are touching. I almost cried hearing his speech and watching that skit. And I know you said you did. So I don't know. Every moment was special, and I loved seeing the family interact together. And just really, really glad we got to experience that.
Yeah, what a gift that not only did we get to experience it, but we got to be royal reporters during it. And so just such a blessing. And to Her Majesty, I mean, my gosh, on the point oh 0.01, there's no chance you're listening, but somebody tell her this for us. On behalf of Jessica and me and all of the podcast royal loyals, I can't speak, podcast royal loyals, thank you, Your Majesty, for 70 years of service, and may there be many more.
Thank you. Listeners, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Podcast Royal. Email us at hellopodcastroyal@gmail.com. And please follow, rate, and review our podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 63 of Podcast Royal. Bye.
Bye.